Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Like I said, this is being recorded, as hopefully some more folks might join us. But I just wanted to start by first saying, this is a new era for Past Summit. And as we will talk about a little bit more tomorrow in the Redgate keynote, we see so many companies and folks that are at least exploring Postgres at some level. And I've had the pleasure just to start to get to know a number of these folks over the last few years, trying to understand what the Postgres community is like, and finding the help that I needed. And so it's really been such a pleasure to just get to know each of them at some level, whether it's through conferences, whether it's through email, having video calls. It's just been a real joy. So as they agreed to come and help present some of the sessions here at Summit, to really dive more into what Postgres is and how folks might be starting to use it coming from something like SQL Server, we decided we wanted to have a panel. And so I'm going to just ask everyone to introduce themselves. We'll just go from this end down. Who you are, what your involvement in Postgres is, maybe how long you've used Postgres, where you're from, anything else you want to share. So Ryan, we'll start with you.
All right, is this on? Yep. My name is Ryan Lambert. I'm owner and CEO of Rustproof Labs. I have a blog that I've been publishing largely Postgres and PostGIS content for about a little over a decade now. So I've been using Postgres since 2011 was when I started. And the main reason that I started using Postgres was because of the PostGIS extension. It was the geospatial aspect of the database that got me pulled in and sucked in and fell in love with the community. One of the main ways I contribute are, writing the blog, providing some training for free out there for the community. I participate in the People Postgres Data Discord channel as well. Sometimes I'm on the Slack. I'm not on Slack as much as I used to be, but working in the community in that way. And I've reviewed a handful of patches, but it's been about 1.5 years since I've gotten down to that patch level.
My name is Pavlo Golub. I'm from Cybertech. They call me senior consultant. I believe that I'm a young developer in the body of senior consultant. So I'm a co-organizer of Postgres Ukraine user group. I'm a lead of Postgres translation and localization into Ukrainian. I do blogs. I write programs. I do talks on conferences. Well, yeah, pretty much.
You give lightning talks.
You have lightning
yes,
talks?
I do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pavlo, and where are you currently at?
I'm from Slovakia right now, but initially I'm from Ukraine. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
All right, I'm Claire Giordano. Very nice to meet you again, Pavlo. And I have worked in open source things off and on since about 2003 when I worked at Sun Microsystems in the kernel group and was involved in open sourcing Solaris. And I got involved in Postgres back in 2017 when I joined a small San Francisco-based startup called Citus Data that was purchased by Microsoft a couple years later. And so at Microsoft, I'm head of our Postgres and Citus community initiatives, which means that I've met a lot of these people at conferences and through their blogs and through their writings and all of their efforts to advocate for Postgres and help people learn about what they need to do. I was also the red-shirted person on stage in the keynote today that did a super cool Azure AI demo. Yay. It was fun. I really enjoyed doing that. I did not build it. It was developed by an engineer and his team, and he gave a different talk today. But anyway, I won't get distracted. I'm very bullish on the future of Postgres. I love working in this space. And in addition to being involved in conferences and blogging, I've also recently started a Postgres podcast where we bring on guests to talk about the human side of Postgres. And actually several people in this room have been guests or will be guests on the podcast or already signed up for future episodes. So it's really fun. Some of our topics include like, how did you get your start as a developer? And how did you start working on Postgres? But we cover other topics as well, including PostGIS. So we had Paul Ramsey and Regina Obey on the show. So check it out if you're curious. And
the title of that is Path to?
The name of the podcast is Path to CitusCon.
Great.
And we frame it for developers who love Postgres. So it's not trying to sell you anything. It's really just about exploring the people in the space in a positive way. That sounds weird. Okay, you're next.
Howdy. So I am Robert Treat. I've been working with Postgres for 25 odd years, or as I like to say, since the last century. I basically just keep receipts in the Postgres community, and then I use those for good, and usually for good at least. Other than that, I've worked as a consultant, kind of came to Postgres as the accidental DBA type person, and have been focused on advocacy work for most of my time in the community, and just try to contribute and help people where I can.
That's great.
Oh, sorry. I also have a talk tomorrow morning, so which is called Think Like a Postgres. So.
And Robert, you also are one of the managers of the Slack channel, correct?
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't know what
an
you
admin on
call
the Slack channel.
Is that what it is, manager or something?
I don't call it anything.
Okay.
But yeah.
That's
You're
great.
the admin.
I'm not
Admin,
the admin.
that's what it is.
I'm just an admin.
Yeah, it's a
You're
community
an
channel.
admin.
but,
I'm a
you know,
helper on the Slack.
You're
channel.
involved. It's good.
Yeah.
All right, Christoph.
Oh, hi, I'm Christoph Pettis. I'm the CEO of PGX. We're a small Postgres consultancy based out in California. I've worked with Postgres, the first version I downloaded was version 6, so pretty much present at the creation. And I do I'm a minor contributor to Postgres, but most of what I do is fix people's databases.
Everyone here, and I should have had each of you just quickly reference for the recording you did. Everyone on the stage does excellent work in blogs, education, helping. Sometimes it might be Twitter, it might be Slack. That's how I've gotten to just know who they are and how just the deep knowledge they have of Postgres. So catch their names, figure out where to follow them so that you can learn a lot more about Postgres as you start to go that direction. So, all right, we're going to run through a number of questions, and if it leads to other questions, that's fine. And we'll leave time for if anyone has something they want to know. The goal of this panel was to just talk. We do this a lot at conferences, like, hey, where's Postgres at and what's happening? There's so much in the space between the big vendors and the not big vendors, and just kind of where we see this going. And actually, Claire, it was a couple months ago, maybe early spring, you had a talk about like preparing for the next, what was it, million users or something? I forget what it was. I thought that was a great idea.
Well, and it was a podcast episode.
Is that what, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that's what I meant, podcast, yeah.
So
So it's out, you can go listen to it.
Exactly.
Great. All right, so here's the first question. What do you think, and anyone's welcome to answer, what do you think has led to the high adoption rate of Postgres over the last couple of years?
We should have a button.
We should.
Need a button. Somebody needs to bring us one of those. Whoever hits it first.
Robert.
Not me. You.
I think the answer to all your questions is money. So Postgres is free. It's super permissively licensed. It has all the features. Like, how can it not win? That was a bet I made like multiple decades ago. I didn't really understand, the time frame it would take to win, but I think eventually it consumes everything, and you will end up using it one way or the other.
So and anyone else can answer, but I just want to ask you about that. But why now? It's always been free. The license has always been permissible. So why the last, I don't know, put a time on it, 10 years, 8 years?
Yeah, so the answer changes depending on the time frame you pick.
Okay.
Right. So, like as an example, when Oracle bought Sun, which had bought MySQL, right? We see a big wave of users that come in. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to trigger you.
No, keep going.
Okay.
Keep
All right.
Oh, yeah, I'm not
Trigger
triggered.
warning. Okay, good.
I had left Sun before the Oracle
Okay,
acquisition.
that's good. Yeah, sometimes I forget. So that was a thing. And you have like when Heroku came on the scene, that was a big wave because it really pushed Postgres to developers as opposed to like sysadmins and DBAs and those kinds of folks. So that was big. When Amazon finally got around to launching Postgres RDS, another huge wave of people came in because suddenly like Postgres was easy to do in the cloud. And now we see, all the other cloud vendors have come on board. You have 2 different offerings for Postgres at Microsoft?
We do. Azure Database for Postgres and Azure Cosmos DB for Postgres.
Right.
So you have choice.
Yeah, so you can kind of go, and it's like super portable in that way. And then the very latest round, which I would probably limit to like 3 to 4 years, what we've seen is sort of the venture money has come in, and people are now building on top of Postgres. And I think most folks that are trying to do new databases are really starting to realize, like, things like the query protocol and all that, those are commodities that you don't necessarily need to have your own, and in fact, it's a negative to build your own from scratch. So if you build on top of Postgres, you get all these great Postgres features, and so that's driving, like when JSON was big 4 or 5 years ago, Postgres easily had that feature set and was able to add it in. Seeing the same thing this past like 12 months with AI and like vectors, storage, and that kind of thing. Like Postgres already had it, and so even if you are thinking like I should go build an AI database, right? There are people out there doing that, but they're having a hard time competing with Postgres because it already has those features and the ability for Postgres to like add and improve on that functionality once people care. I mean, it's just a tremendous thing to have to work against.
Anyone else have a comment?
Yeah, so I agree with Robert about this. So I think that the momentum was when Oracle bought MySQL. I mean, you cannot buy Postgres.
Right.
And at that point in time, people just like, what? We used like to try MySQL everywhere, from our blog to our like home applications, whatever. And now, okay, we can try Postgres instead, and it's free.
If we go back to the first question about why there's been this adoption of popularity, not so much why now, but why to pile onto your free. As I've talked to developers, one of the other things many of them have told me is that it's just so easy to get started. It's easy to try it. You can be a hobbyist, you can be a college student, you can be someone who's looking for something new to do while you're on paternity leave, of all things, and you can go try and get that positive validation. And then because people try it, they like it, it's useful, it's effective, they learn more, and then they start contributing too to the ecosystem and to all the tooling, which makes it even more attractive to new people who come along. And so there's this beautiful virtuous circle that I think has helped too. It certainly helps that it's free. But if it were free and really, really hard to use, I don't think it would be where it is today.
Yeah, I think there was, if you look at kind of the cycle of software development over the last, let's say, 25 years, the first wave of web deployment was very much on proprietary systems. People tended to buy Sun hardware. They tended to run Solaris. They tended to buy a web server. They tended to buy a database server.
The good old days.
They ran, or they'd even, people even pay money for application servers, which is totally unimaginable now. It's, it's like paying money to breathe. But then the next wave was largely built on open source, and there was a lot of casting around for things to do the same job. I started being involved in Postgres in the late 90s, and people were interested in it, but it was considered any open source database, but Postgres was the most prominent. It couldn't possibly compete with Oracle. You didn't run a real business on top of this, and about the version 8 days on Postgres, that started to change. There was a lot of, and then the momentum started to build. There was a lot of word of mouth. There was it became kind of the cool kids are running Postgres, you should run Postgres too. It was free. It's relatively easy to set up and deploy. It's considerably more functional than MySQL. MySQL has its role. It's not a terrible database or anything, but Postgres felt much more like a real database and had real SQL functionality. Then so that was a next increment of adoption. The next increment after that was when first Heroku, as mentioned, and then other cloud hosts started to pick it up, because we were entering a generation where no one wanted to run a computer anymore. They didn't want to get involved in that, and finally having a hosted solution was very important for Postgres. One of the things that delayed, I think, Postgres adoption compared to MySQL in a lot of environments is MySQL kind of had a good multi-tenancy, for that era you would call it hosted solution, before Postgres did. And then RDS came along and all sorts of things, and then the resulting technologies built. And after a while, Postgres became kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Every startup uses Postgres because they all worked at a company before that used Postgres. So, and that kind of momentum is very powerful.
Yeah, that's great.
What's that phrase? The familiar tool is considered the best tool.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of familiarity with Postgres that builds up.
that's great.
And the thing that gets me is I'm biased. It's always the extensions for me. Being able to customize how it functions and make it work differently for your use case is huge. And the stability is also huge. In the time that I've worked in Postgres, the number of real-world bugs and true issues that I've encountered are really small. And that speaks a lot to the code quality, the underlying way that the development team works, and the community built around that. I think that's really a big aspect of that stability.
Yeah, I have data loss bugs against Oracle that I filed in 1999 and 2000 that are still open.
Yeah. All right. So, I would say one of, just considering my story of being involved in SQL Server for a long time and then trying to come and learn something new. I mean, it felt new. There's a lot of similarities. It's relational. But right now, maybe Christoph, I'll start with you. What are some of the biggest obstacles that you've seen, whether with clients, just people you're helping in adopting Postgres today?
Well, you have to choose your words very carefully here. There are very few limitations on adopting Postgres. It's mostly that but there can be a little bit of buyer's remorse. And obviously, I love Postgres, built an entire company around it. But Postgres still does have a little bit of an aura of being a black box and having a priesthood associated with it. Now, as a member of that priesthood, of course, I should find that appealing because people pay money to answer those questions. However, it does slow down adoption, and I will hear people say we were going to use Postgres, but we were worried it was too complicated to run. And this is not so much a hosting thing. You can go to any of the major cloud servers and a bunch of smaller ones, push a button and get a Postgres instance, and you're done. That part's easy, but it does have a reputation of having that there are mysterious maintenance processes, by which they usually mean vacuum. That not that query performance is bad, but query performance is unpredictable, and that sometimes is a matter of hesitation for people. There's also there also have been other issues that have slowly been addressed, like, for example, that it has its own user management, like every database does, but it wasn't well integrated into other user management systems, and those problems are finally being corrected.
That's great. Anyone else? Obstacles you've heard, like why people want to, but they're just...
Yeah, I think most of it would probably piggyback on that. To me, it's always like inertia and tooling. Those are the two big things I see, right? If you are running something else, if you're starting from scratch, then it's just much easier to bring that up, right? So it's often better from a database perspective. If you want to go find new users, go find people who are starting new projects and then try to figure out how do we make it easy for you to start your project on Postgres. If you're migrating over, then you have to look at tooling. And I do think the tooling in Postgres doesn't really mesh with the tooling that we see in other databases that are out there. So I think that's a big one that sort of pushes people towards do I have to learn Linux? I need a command line, what are we doing? Those kinds of questions that for a lot of folks, to move the whole shop, it's just difficult. And if you have a big migration project, right, it can take years to do it. So just the sort of level of effort that's needed for those types of things, I think that always slows it down.
Of course, Uber moved the entire company from MySQL to Postgres and then moved it back again.
Popular article.
Yeah, there's an infamous paper from Uber engineering talking about why they did that. And all of them basically came down to we like MySQL logical replication better than Postgres logical replication.
That's not a horrible reason.
And that's not insane, to be honest. For example, major version upgrades in Postgres are an incredible pain in the neck. And for an organization like Uber, you can't tell people, okay, for 15 minutes nobody can get a ride. That's not going to fly.
I thought the reason they wanted to prove they could move fast and break things. So they showed they could move fast by going to Postgres, and they wanted to prove they could break things by going back to MySQL.
Well, I'm sure it was completely coincidental and had nothing to do with the fact that the new CTO came from a large MySQL shop.
All right. Well, one question that I have had, as I think about, again, being in a space like PaaS and folks learning more about Postgres, a lot of Microsoft SQL Server data platform experience. one of the questions that I have people ask me and I think about a lot is, what is a feature? There's so much within Postgres that is unique, the extensibility and the ability to create new types in ways that you can't in other databases. What is one feature maybe that you wish people knew more about and would consider using in Postgres? Might be a hard question, but.
Wherever to begin. I think actually you named one of them, which is the advanced typing facilities.
Okay.
Some of that is because generally the database administrator as a separate designated role has been on the decline, and those people are expensive, and in the DevOps world there's kind of this feeling like everybody should be able to do that, and there's sort of collegiate responsibility for the database. Above a certain size of organization, that starts falling apart. One of the consequences of that is that it's largely a application-driven approach to the data, and so typing and data modeling tend to be driven by what your application language will do. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect there, because often Postgres' facilities are in fact more advanced than the implementation language. And people are a little reluctant to take advantage of that because they feel like there's going to be an impedance mismatch between the functionality in the application and the functionality in the database.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's PostGIS. I'm trying to remember anything like similar in Oracle or SQL Server, and maybe I just don't know, but I mean, that's a huge, it's not an extension, it's like in the whole world. It's like comparable to the Postgres itself.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they called it a super extension. That there were a few extensions, Citus too, but PostGIS being the number one, that really is so big, so impactful.
Was that your podcast?
No, it was not my podcast.
Was it the other podcast?
It was Michael Christophidis.
Yeah. Postgres FM. That's great.
Going back to the typing, using text instead of varchar 50. And speaking of, what the application does, that's actually easier for the application most of the time, because your Python app doesn't really care how long a string is. And if you need to put a constraint on the length of your text in a database, to use an actual constraint instead of a varchar. And then if you ever need to make that varchar longer, it's just altering a constraint which doesn't block anything, versus changing a data type on a large table can take very long because it has to actually rewrite that data. So using those types, text, date ranges, etc., is really, really helpful.
Yeah. Any other data types that are unique that you see, like the people kind of get an aha moment when they use that?
Well, JSON was already mentioned, and that's a pretty straightforward one.
Yeah. It's becoming huge.
Yeah, I think JSON has reached an inflection point because now people have gone from using it to abusing it. So that's kind of, that means it's sort of won, it's like people really, that suddenly now I'm seeing the primary key plus JSON blob tables starting to arise. So, people are getting very enthusiastic about using Postgres like a document store, and I have mixed feelings about that, let's say.
That's great.
Oh, I know the feature. Feature. Non-B-tree index types.
Ooh.
That is a huge feature of Postgres. I have a whole talk about it. Very important, very useful. No one does it, largely because their migration and schema management systems don't know about them.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of the things I talk about every time I'm talking to new users of Postgres is like, you're used to 2 index types. We start with 6, and it just can keep going. And it's just mind-blowing.
I have to share one anecdote, which is a client had a table type, it was basically a log table, for which a Brin index was a perfect match, like out of the book, this was good. And I said, told them, you should use a Brin index, this will be great. And the next thing I get is an email saying, well, we tried to create it and it didn't work. I said, okay, define, tell me more. And they said, well, we created it and it's only like, 85K. And I said, yes, that's how big Brin indexes in a perfect world can be. It worked fine compared to the I think the tens of megabytes B-tree index that are replaced.
It's really awesome. If one of the unique features of Postgres is, again, it's open source. We've been talking about this. Anybody can take part in that conversation. Where and how do they do it? What has your experience been with
Mailing
the feature
lists.
development?
Mailing lists.
Mailing lists.
Mailing lists. Some IRC.
Mailing lists, yes.
All right.
There's a private Slack channel where all the core committers talk about all the patches, and that's where actually all the real work gets done.
Are you hitting?
I will pull this up as you guys are talking. Anyone who wants to, I think I had this earlier in one of my talks. So what is the process? How do we actually, I have not yet, I've taken part in some conversation actually. But if a feature is necessary, like how does that work within the Postgres space? How do we get to a yearly release?
Well, patches accepted.
Well, so let's back
How
up
do you
for a
start?
second.
Let's back up a little bit.
There's no one company behind Postgres. There's no definitive roadmap for Postgres the way you would see for databases that have one company behind them. And so in that sense, the work gets decided by this decentralized, collective, global group of people who get paid from different places, right? Sometimes big companies
Or don't
pay
get
them,
paid.
consultancies, or sometimes they don't get paid at all. They volunteer, but they all look at what's out there, look at what they're interested in, look at what they're good at. They start working on things, and they submit these patch requests. And there are these commit fests that get done that take a month, where patches get reviewed, and some get accepted, some get more refinement and don't get committed until later.
So is
That's
this like
my
a
high-level
typical,
view.
a typical sprint cycle at a company where you get through a sprint and you release the minimum viable product?
It's somewhat analogous, but that's not a perfect analogy, because the goal is actually not to speed up development, to slow it down a bit, is to create a checkpoint where it's more like a feature freeze that it is like a sprint where there's tons of code going in. You can identify people people will come onto the list and looking for a feature, and usually general or hackers, and you can tell they're used to a different kind of process because they'll say, "What is the plan for implementing X?" Total disk encryption, any of the, that's a big one people ask for all the time. And the answer is, I don't know, you tell us, because they're used to the idea that there's a centralized company that owns the product, that has a roadmap, and Postgres isn't like that. It's basically everyone brings their ideas to it and sells it to the community. And sometimes they'll sell, you want to sort of a priori, if it's a big feature, say, I'm interested in working on this, is there hope, do before I commit the personal or company resources. But also, at some point you have to say, here's some code, what do you think?
Right.
Because that's ultimately what gets, ideas don't get committed, code does. And the most persuasive thing you can do for a new feature is high quality code that actually does the job.
Well, and then code can only be committed by people who have been selected as Postgres committers.
Right.
So there are lots of Postgres contributors and Postgres major contributors, but there's this set of Postgres committers. So their time is in high demand, right, for that tail end of a commit fest process where the code is deemed to be high quality and ready to go.
There's often a lot of discussion about some features, and other features just kind of die on the vine, where it seems like a really good idea, but when it gets out into the commit fest, it just kind of withers, and if there's not that community interest, it doesn't have a whole lot of hope of getting in. So garnering interest in features can be an important part of that process.
Yes, like Robert said today, that developers like to develop patches, but they don't like to review other patches.
Yeah.
So the commit fest is like pushing developers to review and close all these hanging patches.
Is it one, what I put up on the screen, because I believe screens are being recorded for this, this is the web app that anyone can go to see what's in the commit fest, what's going on right now. It goes back to 2014, so you can see all of the stuff that's happened from that point forward. And you can click on any one, so this one says it's in progress, and see if my Wi-Fi is working. And it's just you can see the status of where things are at, what version it's going into. I just clicked on one earlier today. I was showing some folks. I've not been watching this, but this is an update to Postgres FDW. There was a cancel request issue apparently, and so in this case we can see that it's been a part of 3 commit fests so far. And it looks like at this point, it's been approved, so it's just waiting on a committer to actually get it into the code base at some point. There are some that are much longer. You can see that they've been through years of commit fests. You know, it gets to a point, and it can be a challenge. Who manages the commit fests?
So every commit fest has a different commit fest manager, sort of a volunteer label that you get put on. Actually, in most cases, that's 2 to 3 people now per commit fest.
Okay.
And their job is basically like to poke all the people involved and say, hey, are you still working on this? Like, what's the deal? We need the feedback. Are you going to do it? You know, should I just push this off to the next commit fest? Whatever. So they're kind of updating the status board, so to speak.
Anyone else? All right. Just for the sake of video and for anyone here, I'm just going to click on one. I don't really know what I'm clicking on. This one's new. In the CommitFest app, the thing that's really cool is there's always a link, so everything's managed on the mailing list. So if you go to postgresql.org, I'll do that really quickly. There's a community tab, and under the community tab, you can see mailing lists on the side here. And these are all the mailing lists. Some of these go back to the beginning, right? Like in the 90s.
Decades and decades of history there.
And so down here, you can see all of the mailing lists that are available. You can, join them as you would like, contribute if you want. One of them is PostgreSQL Hackers, is this list here.
It's really hard to keep up with that one.
Really hard to keep up with. So this is probably one of the more verbose. The mailing lists asking for help, I would say, have gotten less and less because they've been transferred. A lot of that help has gone to Slack or other places or Twitter or whatever. But there's a lot of conversation in here. But if you want to keep up with a specific patch, it is a way that you could register and you could start to take part in it.
Yeah, anybody can look at this. It's all public.
But when you're in a patch in the actual CommitFest app, right here, there is an email section. And at the top of it is a link to the thread on the mailing list. And if you click that link and open it up, you will see the entire thread dealing with this patch. And in some cases, it can be years long. It might take a break for months. Someone had a patch and they kind of didn't have time and it just languished for, I don't know, I've seen some that almost a year and then suddenly it gets picked back up again. You can see the entire conversation, patches as they were updated and applied. So it's really cool. In some cases, I saw someone recently post a patch. I don't remember what it was. I don't remember now. But it was like, hey, this is why we decided to do this thing 15 years ago. Here's the thread. And, oh, okay. I wish I could remember what it was. And it's all there. It's really, really cool.
I just want to mention one more thing, that not only patches for source code, but as well documentation and all other things are going to CommitFest as well.
Yep. So, and it is sectioned here. So we have clients. There's a documentation section down here. So if you want to contribute or update something, you find a mistake, it still has to be done through the mailing list and through patch.
But this is somewhat controversial, right?
It is.
It works.
Talk about it, Claire.
Well, everybody that I know that's a committer and a contributor is somewhat comfortable with this. It is familiar. It is what they've done for years or decades in some cases.
The beatings continued until the complaining stopped.
Excuse me?
The beatings continued until the complaining stopped.
So, but for somebody new who wants to join this community, it's just so different from the way other development projects work. I mean, there's no activity on a GitHub repo with issues that are being filed and resolved, and it's unfamiliar and it's uncomfortable, I think, for new people. And so there's a question of, are we preventing diversity? Are we preventing new people, or putting these obstacles in place that are getting in the way of what the team in the future could look like?
Well, I've had some of that frustration. The one bug that I submitted to Postgres is related to XML data in pgdump. And I sent off the email, and it was confirmed as a bug, and it was quite difficult to trace down where the bug was fixed, when it was fixed, because the mailing list for the bugs is different than the mailing list for the hackers. And as a new person to that process at the time, I had no clue. And so it was definitely frustrating. I get it. I understand why they do what they do, but it is something that a new user, a new developer has to understand and get through first.
I mean, one of the things that an easy way to pick a fight, if you really want to do this on one of the lists, is say, why doesn't Postgres have a bug tracking system? Blink, blink, and you will get a very opinionated response. It is to be clear, it's not that the project said, "Oh, bug tracking systems, what are those? Maybe we should look into it." It's a conscious decision on the part of the project not to have a bug tracking system. You can debate the wisdom of this endlessly. However, before developing an opinion, I would strongly suggest you subscribe to PG Bugs and for about a month, and then do the division of what percentage of those are actually bugs and how many of them are people don't know how to type SQL. And then think that every one of those bugs would have had to have been opened, managed, closed as not a bug by somebody. And perhaps whether you'll agree with the decision not to have a bug tracker or not, yes or no, but you can understand that this was not a completely insane idea.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that any of my friends in the Postgres world who heard what I said a few minutes ago don't think I was criticizing the trade-offs they've made, the decisions they've made, and the process they're using. I just wanted to reflect that there is some controversy around it, and there is some concern that it is keeping new people out. But hey, Postgres is amazing. It's robust, it's reliable. This process is working in terms of making sure that each new release is a real advancement and is something you can run your business on. So there's a lot of positives here too.
No, and to be clear, whether or not to have a bug tracking system is a colorable, as the lawyers say, a colorable argument. It's not crazy to say
a project
colorable, a legitimate argument.
Okay, I like that word.
It's not insane that a project the size of Postgres would have some kind of centralized bug tracking system or something like that. Some of it is, I'm on the Postgres infrastructure team, and I can tell you the idea of let's fire up a Redmine instance and track all the bugs with that is not received with great pleasure on the part of the infra team, but we'd manage. So it's a reasonable argument, but there is some background of why we don't have one.
Pablo, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so I think that the Commit Fest site is a try to create a GitHub analog, like trying to create a GitHub-like approach. Like, I mean, if we have a user interface which will show us these email threads in the proper way, we don't need a GitHub, right? So.
Yeah, the challenge with GitHub, right, and that's what everyone keeps saying. Why don't we use GitHub and pull requests? And you start to realize when you're dealing with all these patches, like it's actually a challenge to deal with those files and get something that's portable among many systems and people to patch easily. And there's a lot of history in it.
I think the thing that's worth keeping in mind, and Postgres people are bad at this, is that 99% of our users don't care about anything that we're talking about.
Yeah, that's
right?
true.
Like, if you're like getting into Postgres and you're new to it, like the one that might affect you, I think, is like, how do I post a bug and track that?
Yeah.
That's complicated. I did a Twitter thread on it that was, I thought, hilarious because it's so obtuse. But
so what is the answer to that? I think we've been talking about, do we have a bug tracking system? Do we not? What is the answer? How does one file a bug if you're a user?
So if you go to the website, PostgreSQL.org, there is a section for bugs, and there is a web form on that you can submit your bug. It isn't actually going to a bug tracker. It is creating an email that sends to a mailing list, because of course it is. But the important thing is it will give you a number for your particular thing. It reads off of a Postgres sequence. We haven't had 2 billion bugs yet, so we're in pretty good shape. But that number is then useful to go search the mailing lists in order to try to keep track of your bug. It's not 100% foolproof, because email is decentralized and more complicated than you might want it to be, but that's probably the best way. And I think in 99% of the cases, if that bug is legitimate and it is an actual bug, like, you'll get an email. The form's going to ask you for an email to interact with. You'll get an email back like, hey, this bug is committed, and good luck with whatever you want to do with that.
I will say that it is extremely unusual for a bug to just disappear into the ether. If you file a bug and it gets onto the list, someone will take a look at it and respond to it. They may say not a bug for whatever reason. They may, but if they may say we need a better test case. I can't reproduce this. But it's vanishingly small that somebody files a bug on the bug mailing list and there isn't some kind of community action on it.
Yeah, I think so. Also, we should clarify. So earlier you said one of the things that's good is you can't buy Postgres. I would say actually you absolutely can buy Postgres. If you want to write me a check, I will happily give you a copy of it. So you can totally buy Postgres. You cannot own Postgres. In the event that you are running Postgres, there's a pretty good chance you are working with some kind of vendor, whether it's a cloud provider or consulting company or whatever it might be, right? A vendor that built an app on top of the Postgres. Go to your vendor first, because they're the ones that have sold you something that they call a service, and report your bugs to them, right? Like, you don't have to go to the website and go through the mailing list and all that, because that's going to generate a patch, and you're probably not going to want to compile that patch and put it on your own system. Like, that's how I had to do it like 20 years ago, but most people don't have to do it that way anymore,
Right.
Should not do it that way anymore. Really go back to whatever your source is for Postgres, right? And report the bug there. And if it's legitimate, like, they'll eventually go put the web form in and deal with all that hoopla. Most new users don't really actually have to deal with that.
I mean, going off of Robert's comment, I want to make an observation based on a lot of consulting. And this is something I'm saying partially for the archive, because anyone who is at a vendor who hosts Postgres, who has a lockdown version of Postgres, customers are extremely uncomfortable with opening issues. And I will, for example, a client who's running on, just not picking on them, but just name names, like an Aurora instance, and they say, this is weird thing is going on, and we'll look at it and go, you know, that sounds like something Aurora specific, not really Postgres. Have you opened an issue with Amazon? And there's this awkward pause because they think they're kind of like they're going to get into trouble for opening this issue. Like, and really, and a lot of this, I've seen this across all the vendors. I'm not picking on Amazon for this. And it's happens enough that there is some kind of behavioral thing that needs to be changed there, because that level of resistance to opening an issue with a company to whom you're writing a very large check every month is weird.
I hear Oracle now has a Postgres service. Maybe they should switch to that. They'll get much better customer service.
They do, in fact, have a lockdown Postgres instance, a hosted Postgres service, which, so go figure.
Yeah.
You know, oh well, it's worth money.
Let's do, I have maybe 3 more questions here. And then if anyone has a question, I'd love to get 1 or 2 things answered. We've been talking about commit fests. We just had the release of Postgres 16 a month and a half ago, actually almost 2 months ago now. What is a feature that has been included in a recent version that you were really excited about, and maybe you even watched the development take place and you were excited to see this come? You know, maybe the last few, 13 and above, or something like that.
I'll start, and I'll do an old one, so make everybody feel good. So, like, certainly in the consulting game, I'm sure you have this sort of mental model of, like, certain releases, there'll be a feature that you're like, everybody should move to at least this version, right? Like, if it's a new project, always start with the latest version no matter what, because that's the easiest thing to do. But otherwise, if you're on an older version, you should get to something. My current thing is everybody should be on at least 14. And right now, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 are the actives. And the thing that made me pick 14, that got me up to 14, was the change in how Auto Vacuum managed Vacuum for Wraparound, where it could automatically stop scanning indexes and just do wraparound management. And that's a lot of gobbledygook if you don't know the internals of Vacuum and how it works. But one of the things you hear people, you know, sort of, I don't know, cry, not in a, like, negative sense, but just they talk about it openly, like, oh my God, like, I had a Postgres, it had a wraparound and everything blew up, and now, you know, I could never use a Postgres again or whatever. So you'll hear that from certain camps. This particular change, I think, eliminates probably 99% of those cases, unless you have actively done something to, like, cause yourself, you know, extra pain by, like, disabling certain things or misconfiguring the server. So that was a huge one for me, because I think for most people, it really made, you know, it just further catapulted Postgres into the more set it and forget it type model.
Ryan?
B-tree index deduplication.
I was going to name the same thing.
Yes.
Brian's think alike.
I guess so.
With I don't remember what version that came in. I think
13,
it was 13. But with if you have duplication in your data that you have covered by a B-tree index, which is what 99% of indexes are, it will deduplicate that and greatly reduce the size of your indexes. So if you have a column that you've indexed that has a bunch of null values, or 98% of your values are 1 for whatever reason, that index just dropped exponentially in size.
Oh, great. I like that.
I'm happy that every major release of Postgres brings you a lot of small things. I'm not a fan like we need to have like a huge one each year. Well, the last huge one which made me happy was like 8.0 when we had like Windows support, native Windows support.
Oh,
that changed my life literally.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm very happy that the project is consistent in having these small things that make your life easier.
Yeah. No, that's great. Claire.
So anybody who has children, Ryan, you have a lot of them, knows that you can't really pick a favorite. Like, you know, if you ask me, is my son or my daughter my favorite? I'm sorry, I love them both. So it's very hard for me to answer that question, but I will share a story that I wrote a blog post because of you, Rob. You sent me a note on the Postgres Slack and said, hey, it's really hard to keep track of everything that's going on with Postgres at Microsoft. Somebody really should write a blog post about that. And I was busy and I was like, great idea, I'll do that. Months went by, but I finally did it. I wrote this post, and in order to write it and cover everything, I had to talk to our committers and contributors who work almost purely on the open source project, not really on Microsoft or Azure things. And you know, I found the list of all the stuff that they had contributed, and of course the world had contributed so much more. And when you dive in, you're like, wow, that would be my favorite. And then you get to the next one, you're like, oh, that's cool too. I can't pick, okay? And when David Rowley showed me all the performance improvements that are not visible new features that he committed into Postgres 16, but they are things that make your life better, right? Because they've reduced memory overhead or improved the performance of Palak. And, you know, it's not some new feature that users are going to talk about, but they're going to get better performance, which I think is pretty awesome.
It's awesome.
So the first feature is actually a set of them. Something that most people are experiencing, just like Claire said, but really don't notice, you know, because it's not a headline feature of, you know, now we support JSON kind of level, is over the course of Postgres version since about 10, its ability to handle large numbers of connections and a large amount of parallelism has changed in a revolutionary way. If you run a benchmark on, say, Postgres 9.6 and then on Postgres 16, and you just keep firing up more and more parallel query activity, the difference is astonishing. And this has been one little improvement after another. And this was a serious problem in 9.6 and earlier versions of Postgres, and it is completely not a serious problem now. And it required a lot of work over that. So that's the invisible feature. The visible feature is that my current favorite is one that is in 16. And interestingly enough, it hasn't gotten a lot of play. Even some people's what's new in 16 talks completely omit it, which is, and it has a really boring name, logical replication origin filtering. Doesn't that get you excited?
Yeah.
Because one of the things people really want in Postgres is multi-master logical replication, or bidirectional logical replication. It's a feature MySQL has had for years. Sometimes I have to disappoint people because they say, well, we'd like to use multi-master on our Aurora, suddenly I can't say Aurora, installation. And I said, Postgres doesn't support that. He said, but look at this page on Amazon's site, and what they don't know is they're reading the one about Aurora with MySQL compatibility, not the one with MySQL Postgres compatibility, and they're very sad. So this is the first step to in-core bidirectional replication in Postgres, logical replication. It's not the full feature set, but we finally started embarking on that journey. And when the full feature set is fleshed out, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be a big difference to the way people run Postgres.
That's awesome. All right, last two. Oh, Claire, were you going to say something?
No, I was going to ask Rob if he wanted to answer the question.
I have two sons. The one that knows who was my favorite, he knows who he is, and the other one should do better.
All right, last two questions then. Again, talking about improvements, is there anything, and if you don't have something, that's fine, but is there anything right now that you know of, as we're already embarked on Postgres 17? Is there anything that's in discussion that you've seen or just is interesting, or you've heard chatter, but maybe no one's taken it, and you wish, like, yeah, I really wish that Postgres would start to do that? And if you don't, that's fine.
Incremental materialized views built into core.
Ooh, I like that.
So actually, what I was going to say is it's not the activity in core that I am actually think is kind of exciting and whatnot. It is all the stuff going on externally, most of it around AI, that I think is just reinforcing a lot of lessons that, like, the philosophy that Postgres has kept about extensions, about the ability to have that development go on outside of Postgres, and how quickly we can rapidly add feature sets around that. You know, I don't know how much of that is a good idea, but the fact that we can do it, and we're seeing investment of people's time and money into that sort of realm, that to me is very interesting and kind of a departure, I think, from other stuff that I've seen. So that actually has me more excited at this point than what I see in 17. So that may change, but.
Awesome.
Before I answer your question, I want to just segue on extensions for just a moment.
Please do.
I'm very biased because I started my work in Postgres as part of Citus, which is an extension. So like I became a fan of extensions from day one. It's like in my DNA now. But I was talking to Ryan Lambert, not Ryan Booz, earlier today, and you were talking about how you've written 4 extensions in Rust now. So I think that's a really interesting thing, potential for the future. They can be more secure or safer and certainly easier to write. And I'm curious to see how that'll change the future ecosystem of extensions that get created.
Very cool.
Yeah, everything that's happened with PGRX, with building Rust extensions, making them safe, making them fast, like that opens the door to all sorts of innovation without having to be a C programmer to write Postgres style C, which is really hard, at least for me.
All right.
Can I answer your question now, though?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. So rather than name a feature, I think one of the things I hope for Postgres coming up in the next year or 2, maybe 3, is like look at the fact that there are Postgres people interested in Postgres at PASS this year.
Right.
I think that's a good thing, and I'm really curious to see like what'll it look like in 5 years. I'm a huge fan of PGConf.eu, right? It's this amazing Postgres community event that just is growing year over year over year. I don't know where it'll land this year, maybe 750 people, maybe 800. It's going to be in Prague in December. It is such an amazing place to be. There's a buzz in the room and so much excitement, but we don't have anything that big in the United States. I would love to have a Postgres event where people come, they network, they learn, the hallway track is amazing, that has over 1,000 people, that has 2,000 people. I mean, goodness knows, there are a lot of Postgres users out there. And so some of the changes in the investments, I know PGConf New York City is growing year over year as well now, but it's only in its 3rd year. So I'm hopeful that there can be more community learning that gets driven as a result.
I love that answer. I totally agree with it. I'm excited and hopeful for that too. So that's great. I had one other question that just came to mind, and it has left me because it's not on this page. Oh no. Well, tell you what, I'll keep thinking about that. Does anyone have a question they would want to ask?
Okay, can you use the microphone?
I'll repeat it.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Send us an email.
Put it on the mailing list.
I think the main point's going to be very quick though, but I gotta set it up.
Did you write yourself notes?
I did. I didn't want to leave
love it.
anything out. I work for a government entity that goes through a vetting process before it allows any software to be used. My project is currently on Postgres 9.4.
Ouch.
I'm going to be tasked with a multi-version upgrade soon. I'm anticipating 12 or 13. Christoph, you said it's a pain. What do I need to look out for? Do I have to upgrade one major release at a time, or can I go all at once? Things like that.
Okay, all right. I'll give you the first big question. Do you use PostGIS?
PostGIS?
Yeah. Do you? Okay. Then your life just got an order of magnitude easier. You can go all the way from 9.x to 16 with one PG upgrade run. Unless your database is trivially small, you're going to want to use PG upgrade. I probably don't want to discourage you from upgrading because of my previous unguarded comment. You just have to be prepared for a certain amount of downtime and a little bit of fiddliness. Are you running on a Linux environment?
We're running Docker containers.
It's a,
Whoa, in Windows.
For the archive, they're running Docker containers on Windows.
okay.
With 9.4.
With 9.4.
That's fantastic.
I'm sorry, I can't help. I jest. I mean, if the database is that small, just do a dump and restore, and you're done. You know.
The big question is if you can have downtime, then this is not a huge problem. Then, yeah, I mean, you have problems, but they're not huge.
Yeah, the people who really suffer are the people with multi-terabyte databases that have like 3-minute downtime windows. Those are the people who have to like really stretch themselves to do a upgrade. If you have a 100 megabyte database and you can take the weekend to upgrade it, you're fine.
All right, I'll take the other question. I remember my question. What is your recommendation? New users, you mentioned conferences, and that's what brought it to mind. Like, where should people go to connect? You know, figure out how to become a better user of Postgres. Is it conferences? Is it something? You know, whatever. How do you see that?
I guess if you don't already have a favorite forum, I assume everyone wants me to say Slack because I do a bunch of stuff on Slack. Also, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at RobTreat2. I'm pretty sure I can point you to whatever you need to find out. So just ask me the questions there. Forget everything else. That's fine.
Yeah, I would second either the community Slack channel. There is a community IRC channel, and it's very good for very specific questions. If you come in with a very specific technical question, dump it on the IRC channel, you'll often get a very positive answer. I use it in 20 plus years of Postgres experience. So if you like a face-to-face environment, there is a conference which has now been renamed pgconf.dev. It's going to be in Vancouver in May. And it is a continuation of an older conference, PGCon, that is the primary Postgres developer conference. The reason that somebody brand new to Postgres will want to go to it is it's a bit of a gathering of the tribe of the most experienced Postgres developers, and you can just walk up and ask them questions. And regardless of how they may appear in email, he said guardedly, they are very friendly people, and you will not get bitten.
That's great.
I also want to say that on the podcast, I really am not trying to sell you guys on listening to my
It's a great podcast.
But Ryan, Ryan Booz,
Yeah.
you and Grant Fritchie were guests a couple months back, and the topic was my favorite resources for learning more about Postgres. And oh my goodness, the show notes for that episode, you don't have to listen to it. You can just look at the show notes. And the set of links is so rich, from books to online tutorials to conferences to favorite blogs and Planet Postgres, of course, which is a syndication of many Postgres blogs. And then there's the monthly blog fest that you run called PGSQL Friday. There's even learning Andreas's weekly Postgres Person of the Week, where you can actually learn a lot of knowledge, not just about the people, but about the things they work on. I mean, it's just huge. Yep. So that, I think, is a great resource because we came up with a long list.
By the way, one thing I would also say, if you have a favorite venue, like whatever that is, if it's a conference or a particular community or something, like they say, like, please like and subscribe and rate us 4 stars or whatever, like, tell your conference organizers, like, hey, we want to see Postgres content, right? Like, if you go to like a particular Ruby conference or Django conference or whatever, tell those people we'd like to see more Postgres content, and that will help get content that is probably maybe more directed towards what you need, but also, have them reach out with the Postgres community. We're trying to work with all those conferences and bring it where it needs to be, but they need to hear that feedback that their users are looking for that.
That's great.
And I know the Past Data Summit people are going to be looking for feedback on, was this smart to have these Postgres talks this week? And was this smart to have 2 Postgres talks at the same time, causing people interested in Postgres to have to pick between 2 amazing speakers? And yeah, so yeah,
That was not
give
my
them the
choice.
feedback.
I had no hand in that whatsoever.
Or maybe
I
don't
actually
put it next to Power
I actually
Hour.
didn't realize it until last night when I was looking at the sessions. I was like, wait a second. So,
Yeah, tomorrow at 1:30, you get to choose between coming to my talk about how to get involved in Postgres and Chelsea Dole's talk about vacuum and bloat. So we're going to have a little competition, and I want to win.
they're both great talks.
Claire doesn't like
Can't
people to
lose.
have to pick favorites.
And everyone that's here, at least, that doesn't help people who are listening to this later, but everyone who's here at the conference will get access to the recordings of all the sessions, so you can go back and
Will be there available
publicly
year, maybe after, like before the next Past Data Summit?
before the next summit. Usually we will make them available, yeah. Eventually. I don't...
TBD.
Yeah. Things have changed, and I believe the current conversation, I don't have a hand in it, but I do believe it used to be it was at least a year because they wanted to hold it as a bit of a, but that was prior to Redgate. I believe our goal is within, I think, 6 months or something like that. We want to give people that are here, they paid, the opportunity to experience it, and then start to release some of those things.
I also want to mention the.
I don't know if that's true. Sorry.
I also want to mention the U.S. PostgreSQL Association. You can go to postgresql.us to look it up. It is a membership organization. It's $25. You can, not expensive. That's an advocacy and support organization for Postgres in North America and Belgium. I don't get it. But they also provide an umbrella meetup account for local meetups, and some of the meetups are in person, and if there's one near you, that's great. Others are 100% virtual. For example, the San Francisco Postgres Users Group is now 100% virtual, so you can come to our meetups from anywhere.
And you're one of the organizers.
I am one of the, in full disclosure,
you,
PGX sponsors the San Francisco meetup, but don't take my word for it. Show up and see.
Yeah.
And one more notice, if you're a student or young developer, we do Google Summer of Code for Postgres.
That's right.
And I do mentoring if you want to work with me, or anyone else, apply for it.
All right.
One more thing for learning for new users, the Postgres docs are really good. The documentation has really good examples. There's good code examples. There's generally fairly human readable, understandable content. Don't skip the docs.
Yeah. It's deep. There's a lot of, the developers write the docs, and so there's a lot of good technical content there.
So I'm going to ask what I hope is a tough question.
Okay?
Yes.
If you're the host at a restaurant, you ask what's good, and they say everything. Don't believe them, right? So what don't you like? What is it about Postgres that drives you nuts?
So the question is, what is something that really drives you nuts about Postgres?
The community.
Come on, you know it.
For me, it's Robert Street.
Slack channel.
That's true.
Features and
Oh, sorry, yeah, features.
working with it. I mean, there's something that we should know to look out for.
You mean from a technical perspective?
Not the people we should.
I'll mention that at PGConf EU, I'm giving an entire talk on that exact topic called "Why is PostgreSQL Terrible?" So, but I'll offer my first one, which is the opacity of the query planner. The query plans will just change mysteriously with no explanation, and it requires a lot of specialist knowledge and digging around to decide why. This often veers off into a discussion about query hints, which is another great way of picking a fight in the community, so I won't go into that.
Yes,
I was
it's not-
literally writing that down as he was talking.
Yeah,
like,
it's
what about
not.
PG Hint?
Yeah, can I say PG hint plan?
Yeah.
No, but that's the lack of hints inside Postgres. That would be on my list if I were to have one. So,
All right, quickly, we're almost out of time. So anyone else? I just want any other answer, and then we're going to get over here.
Yeah, so, someone can say vacuum or wraparound or whatever, but it's like, come on. I would say that if I want an extension, not for Linux, but for Windows or other operating system, I'm fucked up.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
badges welcome.
Yeah, there you go. All right, maybe last question.
All those people talking, nobody mentioned ICU, which I'm a big fan of. But tragically, didn't they back out?
Wait, let's give
Let's
you a
get you a
microphone.
mic. I didn't realize
Yeah.
you're getting technical here.
Collations, I hate that.
I
But
said
don't think
all
it's
this,
a
all
Postgres
this
thing.
feature talk,
Thomas
and nobody
loves
mentioned
collations.
nobody mentioned ICU, which is like one of my favorites. There's tons of like really awesome stuff.
What is
16.
ICU?
It's from Unicode collation stuff. But tragically, if I was paying attention right, we backed out the patch right before 16 came out, which would have made it to the default for initdb, right? So what's going on with that? Do you think we'll actually get like legit ICU by default at some point? It's also kind of hard to tell how much traction it has in the community. It feels like a very small group of deep specialists having this kind of small conversation, and it's hard to kind of tell. So I'm curious what you guys think.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick summary. So for people that don't know about this, one, you're lucky. And then two, so basically like collations are underlying libraries in your system that control how words are sorted. So you can imagine that might be important if you're going to do things like build indexes. And in the US, we mostly bypass this by not actually realizing there are other languages in the world. That's a nice place to be, by the way. But for other countries, like this is absolutely a critical thing that for sure they need to be able to support. And ICU is kind of, I would say, the industry standard at this point as the way to do it, as opposed to like just use the random libraries that come with your operating system. So we've been pushing towards the more standardized way to do it that provides better functionality and you can actually upgrade properly without breaking everything.
To spell it out even more, my understanding is the reason this is a challenge is if you upgrade your operating system, then your indexes might be broken because they might be sorting information wrong because there could have been a change in libc, for example.
There can be other issues, like you can corrupt data if you play the collation game the wrong way. Like it can be really, really bad.
Yeah, there was a specific problem. Was it Ubuntu 18 to 20, or it was one of those jumps that their underlying libc implementation changed, and if you used non-ASCII, 7-bit ASCII characters, then you would instantly corrupt your indexes by just doing this upgrade silently, which was considered bad. So there is a lot of, and that is one of the pressures behind ICU being on by default, because ICU doesn't have this problem, because we can detect change. We have better detection of changes in the underlying collation. I don't know the exact details of why the patch didn't land in 16, but there is pressure on it. So whether it'll land in 17 or not, my suggestion is go find the patch in the commit fest and review it and see what's going on there.
All right, we are out of time. And we got to go to a sponsor party downstairs and get some hors d'oeuvres and some drinks. Thank you all very much. I can't express how excited I am that all of these folks are here this week. Being a part of PASS has been a big part of my career, my life, and it's just really fun to see this new kind of cooperation. And so thank you very much for all of your efforts in being here and for being a part of this today.
How many of us have these
Thank you so much for organizing this.
First-timers?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone here is a first timer.
So.
No, you're not. Yeah, you've been here. Yeah.
My second time.
Thank you very
All
much,
right,
Ryan,
thank you so
for
much
organizing the panel.
inviting
for
us.
coming.
Thank you for having us. Yeah.
Exhibit down at the exhibitors. In a couple of minutes, they'll open the door again, and there'll be some hors d'oeuvres and games. Killer DBA is going to be performing 4 different songs tonight. He's awesome, Homer, so go listen to him. And have a great afternoon. We'll see you evening. We'll see you tomorrow. Please come to the Red Gate keynote. We're going to talk a lot about Postgres.